on the plane, at some point I sort of leaned over to across the aisle to see what my dad was doing, and he had a piece of paper, and it was a blank piece of paper, and he wrote out two lists, and one list said, things to keep doing after Phyllis's death, and the other list was things to do differently.
Wow.
I mean, my father's a very unusual Chinese
That
man.
is just a very unusual person, much less a man.
I'm Sara Jane Ho, and this is Mind Your Manners, where no topic is off limits as we uncover the secrets to feeling at ease in every situation.
Grief is something we all face, and yet most of us don't know how to talk about it. We don't know what to say when someone we love is grieving, and when we go through loss ourselves, we're often left alone, unsure how to process it or how to move forwards. I lost my mother when I was 21. She was everything to me, a force in my life, my inspiration, and the model of the grace and compassion I try to bring into everything I do, especially this podcast. Losing her changed me. The grief has softened over time, but it's still with me, shaping how I love, how I work, and how I move through the world. That's why I wanted to have this conversation with Dr. Berman. She's a world-renowned therapist, a best-selling author, and also of her new book, Sex Magic, and she's the host of the Language of Love podcast. But most of all, she's someone who knows grief intimately. Her 16-year-old son, Sammy, died tragically after being given fentanyl-laced drugs, and Laura chose to grieve publicly. In doing so, she opened a conversation that we all need to have. This episode is about loss, yes, but it's also about healing, staying connected to those we've lost, and learning how to show up for one another with love and grace. Dr. Laura, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, can you share the story of losing your son Sammy with us?
Yeah. And, your words about your mother really moved me too, because I lost my mom, who was the same for me. She was my person about 10 years before my son died. But that was my most impossible, profound loss before that, before Sammy. So I intimately understand the pain of losing your mother and what that means, especially when you're so close to her. And I was no stranger to loss. By the time Sammy died, I'd been by the beds. I'd been with my mother when she transitioned, both my grandmothers, my father, my spirit mother, who was like my second mother. So I was no stranger to grief. But yes, in February 7, 2021, my 16-year-old, while we were sheltering at home during the pandemic, I had loosened all the reins on social media because he was on the football team and straight A student, planning to apply he wanted to go to NYU to study international business. And when the pandemic hit, they were all socially isolated completely. Yeah. So I took off the brakes on social media and said, as long as you do well in school, I'm not going to limit, because that's your only social interaction. But I did not understand back then. And unfortunately, I think parents still don't understand that letting your kids on social media, in particular Snapchat, where 85% of them are, is like letting them out in the worst, most dangerous area with prostitutes, pedophiles, drug dealers, and just letting them out of the car and expecting them to navigate that. I had no idea that drug dealers are matched with our children through the app and solicit them through the app. And that is what had happened, unbeknownst to us, to Sammy. And so a drug dealer got in touch with him and offered him a colorful menu of drugs he would deliver, like a pizza, to the door, and even offered some of it for free.
Wow.
And so Sammy, the only reason I know all of this is because he took a screenshot of it and sent it to his friend and said, I'm going to accept this guy's offer. I'm going to order some drugs. And so he got them. This guy came in the middle of the night while we were asleep and delivered the drugs, which he then, good kids make dumb decisions. And he was bored, stuck at home, and thought he'd experiment. And it was laced with fentanyl. And so his little brother and I found him on the floor of his room, gone.
And what did it mean for you to choose to grieve publicly? How did grieving publicly affect your healing?
Well, anyone who knows me well knows that I don't, I'm not the most, I would not do well, I'm not the most etiquette and mannered person when it comes to being filtered. I've never been, which is part of my gift, because I talk about things that most people don't talk about, like sex and death. But it's very painful for me to hide how I'm feeling. It makes it so much harder for me. And so what first happened is, because I didn't even realize this would happen, but basically what went down is, after he died, I was trying to figure out what the heck happened. And I finally got in touch with his friend, which is when I found out about the drugs. And his friend sent me the screenshot, which had this guy's, the dealer's handle on it, his Snapchat handle. So the police were still in my house. And I went running to them and said, here's the guy. Let's, you can catch him. And they looked at me and they said, we're so sorry. We don't even bother calling Snapchat. They won't give us any information. They won't even answer our calls. There's nothing we can do. And I went ballistic. I mean, I was already psychotic with, keening with the pain of what had just happened, but I went really nuts. And for some reason, all I could think about in that moment was the fact that this guy was now going to be giving these fatal drugs to other kids. And my husband, really just because he knows how to handle me and wanted to calm me down, said, just post to your community. Like, let people know. That will make you feel better. So I don't even remember writing the post. I found some picture of me and Sammy. I wrote something and said, watch out. My main purpose was like, watch out for your kids. They get drugs through Snapchat. He's gone. I don't know how to keep breathing. It was something like that. And it went viral. And the next day I started getting called by every news outlet, every producer I'd ever worked with, every show, asking me to come on and talk about it. And I remember turning to my husband and being like, I can't imagine doing hair and makeup. I can't even complete a sentence without snot running down my face. Like, I don't think I can do this. And he said, yeah, but who cares? And, who cares if you're crying? Yeah. If you go, you want this not to happen. So think about it, that each time you talk about it, you might be saving one child. And so I decided, just for a week, I gave myself a week, because I knew I couldn't do it indefinitely, and named the show. I went on it, mostly in an effort to save other children and let families know, because I had no clue. And I thought, a really well-informed parent, who talked to my kids about all this stuff and understood all the risks. And I had no idea. And so as I'm on all these news shows, I'm crying my eyes, snot's running down my face. I'm crying out loud because I couldn't help it. And then I started getting all these messages from people, not just your message about your warning, but just seeing how honest you are in your grief has made me realize that I can be honest in my grief. And that's when I started realizing we're all grieving in secret. And that's so painful. Not to be witnessed in your pain, not to be able to own your pain, to be open with your pain. And for me, it's like a pressure valve. If I release my pain and don't try to hide it, I mean, obviously there's a time and a place for it, I guess, but if I don't hide it, it makes it so much lighter to hold.
That reminds me when you said that you were beside your mother when she transitioned. I assume by transitioned you mean
she died, yeah.
The moment that she passed. In Chinese, we actually call that song zhong, which is kind of giving away the clock. Mm-hmm. I guess is how you would kind of translate it. But it's very important to be when you can be with somebody when they transition.
Yes, it's sacred.
It's sacred. And when I was 21 years old and lost my mother to liver cancer, me, my father, and her mother, so my grandmother, were by her side when she transitioned. And I remember at that time I was reading a book. I think it was maybe a short list on the Man Booker Prize or something. I forgot the name of the book, but there was, every chapter opened with some sort of quote. But I still remember the quote, and it said, shared joy is double the joy. Shared sorrow is half the sorrow.
Hmm.
And what you just said about how every time you spoke about it and shared it with the world, it lessened your burden.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah. And there was one day where I was posting on social media and I just started, because I couldn't control it, I started bawling. And I got all of these messages from people saying, thank you. Like, you doing this publicly is letting me know that that it's okay to feel this way, that I can cry out loud, that I can be in pain. And so that's really what started it. So that, I love that quote.
And grief is something that affects all of us.
Yes.
Like, all of us, no matter where we are from in the world, no matter rich or poor, educated, what background, what ethnicity, we all will lose someone who we love.
Yes.
And we will all grieve. The work you're doing is particularly powerful. I think, what is very shocking for you is that there were so many unanswered questions,
Mm-hmm.
and it was so sudden.
Yes.
You probably have regrets and things that you wish you could have said. And for me, I remember when my mother was diagnosed. I'm going to get emotional.
That's okay. Cry out loud, girl. Go ahead.
We should have a tissue box for this episode.
Yeah, I know.
That's fine. So it was my senior spring, and my mom was diagnosed, and from death to diagnosis was actually just 3 months.
Yeah. Same as my mom. Yeah.
And but I flew back. I was at Georgetown in Washington, D.C., flew back to Hong Kong. And I was there with her for 2 weeks. I got time off of school. And they said, and I told my mom, because it's a very Chinese thing to do, to say, to kind of just quit your life and just be by your dying parent.
Mm-hmm.
It's considered like a filial piety thing.
Yes.
So to me, I thought, okay, I told my mom I can put Georgetown on hold, even though I'm going to graduate. I said, I'll put it on hold. I'll stay with you for as long as you need me. And my mother looked at me and she said, look, that's the last thing I want you to do. I'm ready, like as a parent, the last thing I want you to do is see my child give up her life. She said, you're going to graduate. You have an amazing job lined up in Wall Street, New York City. I was going to do banking at a boutique investment bank as an analyst. And I thought how selfless it was of her to let me do that,
Mm-hmm.
to continue with my life. They say that she waited till I graduated. So I graduated and then went back to Hong Kong, and pretty much a week or two, thank you, babe, this is all we need. And two weeks later, she was hospitalized, and then very quickly she passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was June 7th was the day she passed away. It wasn't as sudden as yours.
Yes.
And then I have friends who have parents who are dying for 5 years.
Yes.
And I think that is even more painful.
Yes.
Than what I had to experience. Or their parents are in a coma. Or, and my friends, I see them, they give up their career
Mm-hmm.
to take care of, maybe their father who was single because,
The mother's already gone.
Yeah, the mother's already gone, or they're divorced, or blah, blah, blah. And it's hard either way, but I do think that for me, like, I'm just glad that I had enough time to spend with my mother, but that it didn't drag on for too long.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a gift. I experienced both. My mother, like yours, from diagnosis to death was 3 months. And I was actually filming a 5-day-a-week live radio show on Oprah Radio and a television show with OWN at the time she was dying. And I ended up being able to postpone the filming, but I literally would go down to Florida where my parents were living from Chicago, where I was, and set up my little radio setup in my parents' office and literally do it next to my mother's room where she was dying. And I somehow managed to keep it all afloat. But that was a real gift in a way, to have that time, obviously, to say goodbye. And to say everything that I wanted to say, and to have her say everything she wanted to say, which obviously I didn't get to do with Sammy. With my dad, he was ailing and dying for years before he went. And there's as painful as that is, there's also, and I was his person too, and his caretaker, although I wasn't with him full time. But there is a gift in that too, in that the grievers often feel some relief, when it's a long drawn out illness, they're in so much pain, you're in so much pain. as sad as you are to see them go, everybody is ready, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
so there is a little bit of peace in that as well. But it's any kind of loss like that is, I don't know that one is better than the other. We could make an argument that sudden death is, there's advantages to that too. But they all are terrible, beautiful. That's for sure.
So how does grief affect the body, mind, and spirit, especially when the grief is unspoken, when we don't share it?
Well, it's interesting because I learned this lesson, and I think part of the reason I cried out loud in the way that I did with Sammy is because I had learned that lesson with my mother. My mother died of what was ultimately metastasized breast cancer. And I was doing all of these things at the time. And I did not want to feel all the pain I was feeling, nor could I. And actually, a healer that I worked with, because I was like, I'm going on to set. Like, I can't be, they just did my hair and makeup. I can't stop filming because I'm having a bawling session, So she actually taught me how to contain temporarily, supposedly. You contain it, and then you kind of come back to it later. If you're in a situation, and I teach people this, if you're in a situation where you literally are like in a professional meeting and you can't like lose it, or you're on set like I was, and then you can contain it, put it in like a little box, and then you're supposed to come back to it later and feel it. And there's a process for doing that too. Well, the way that I dealt with it was just to contain. And I never wanted to go back to feeling it. Who wants to do that? So I didn't. And I got through filming, got through everything. Within a year of my mother dying, I was 40 years old, no genetic predisposition. My mother's cancer came postmenopausal, nothing to do with BRCA or anything else. Really healthy 40-year-old woman. I had breast cancer in the same breast she did within a year of her death, and had to completely stop my life, have a mastectomy, go through chemotherapy. It was a huge ordeal. And I knew even then, and this was before I knew as much as I know now, that it was unprocessed, that I hadn't allowed myself to feel how I was feeling. And that is what I really believe, and I know this is true in Chinese medicine, that's what causes dis-ease, is those things we're unwilling to feel. I mean, obviously there are lots of factors involved in illness, but one of them, the body holds the memory of the trauma and of the pain. And if we don't allow ourselves to feel it, I'm not saying if you don't feel your feelings, you're going to get cancer, but for me, that definitely was the case.
In Chinese culture and Chinese medicine, we actually say that for women, anger or upset is held in the chest,
in the lungs, right?
Yeah, well, grief is in the lungs, yes. And unprocessed sort of anger emotions is in the chest. My mother, who was very much a career woman, very ambitious, very hardworking, but no, she also, I don't think she was a particularly emotionally mature person. She would let things get to her. I grew up in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is full of angry people because it's just very stressful and it's very materialistic.
Yeah.
And there's not much space or interest in spiritual or emotional health. And the culture is really just money in Hong Kong. But it's got that Chinese layer of culture where you don't show your emotions. So my mother would keep all these unhappy emotions bottled up. And I do believe that is what contributed to her own. Because she had breast cancer first, and then a couple of years later then had liver cancer.
Yes, I really do believe that too. And it's also, and the emotional piece, obviously, it takes a huge toll. One of the interesting things I have found spiritually now, since Sammy's death, I have really been called and have dive deeply into supporting other grievers once I realized fully how grief illiterate we are as a society and how much support. And I found the path to healing. I've been working hard to share that with others. So I speak to thousands of grievers. And one of the things that's really beautiful, I think, about grief, if you accept the invitation, is that it can be a portal of transformation. If you allow yourself to go into it, and you don't do what I did with my mother and just say, okay, I'm just going to contain it, ignore it, just go on with my life. Everything will be okay. If you really allow yourself the grace to feel your feelings with support and move through the process, it will burn away everything that isn't yours to carry. It will transform you. And for so many, it becomes a path to awakening. And it's such beautiful ways that just like bring me to tears when I see it. Sometimes it's in an effort to stay connected to that person on the other side. So maybe you were totally left brain, materialist, whatever, didn't believe in anything metaphysical, and then your loved one dies and you're so longing to connect with them that maybe you reach out to an actual medium, not a charlatan, or you have your own spiritual experience, and it just cracks the door open. And then once you peek through, you're like, whoa, there's this whole universe on the other side. And I've seen so many people awaken in such beautiful ways through the path of grief when they're willing to step into it.
Yeah, I agree. I had the same journey. And also more recently, I opened sort of a spiritual door and saw that side of the universe.
Yeah.
But if that is the case, why does society avoid conversations about loss and grief?
Well, there's lots of interesting theories about that. But first of all, anything uncomfortable, we tend to not talk about. But this I thought was really interesting, that in World War II, and this actually started in the UK, but it also was happening in the United States once we got involved, so many people were dying, in the war, that it became this kind of politically and socially incorrect thing. And the government had a lot to do with it. You know how they do their insidious messaging.
Yeah, they're subtle, yeah.
They did not want people going around the streets keening in the thousands. What
does keening mean?
Like throwing yourself on the ground. Like when Sammy died, I went into a fugue state. I mean, I only know what happened because of what I was told by my son and my husband who were in the house. But I was literally throwing myself on the ground, wailing and screaming. And it's an ancient, or when you see people ululating in Eastern communities or in Africa where they're, they're just like, whoa, that's keening.
Well, you know what? I've also done keening then.
Yeah.
When my mother passed away in my bedroom, I remember I was alone at home and I just was on the floor and wailing and crying.
Yes, that's keening. So you could not do that during wartime where they're trying to keep bringing people in, they're trying to keep morale up, and there are thousands of mothers on the street wailing and crying and going into, horrible states because their children had died. The society would have crumbled and they wouldn't have been able, it would have ruined morale and not helped the war effort. So this became this very concerted and intentional social effort to hide your grief. Which I thought was so fascinating when I first learned about it, as I started to try to understand why we don't cry out loud. But in ancient times, we did.
Yeah.
And we were given, now we're given maybe a week of, bereavement leave. And then you're supposed to come back and just be like, woohoo, let's go. I'm fine. I won't talk about it. I won't make anyone else uncomfortable with my sadness, and you just stuff it all.
And actually, keening is a good thing, right? I mean, when you let it out, you wail, it helps with processing it. What are some tips that you have on how to heal? I mean, I think you have some pillars of healing.
Yeah.
6 pillars of healing.
Yes, I do. I discovered through my own process what worked. And then I started teaching other people. Then I started creating retreats. And I found that it really does work. It's generalizable. It works for others. But basically, you need different things. One, what you're talking about, the somatic piece, that's allowing your body and your heart to process, to release the pain so that you aren't containing it or stuffing it. And you can do that in controlled ways and in ways that don't fully disrupt your life. But when you do, it actually is unbelievably healing physically, but also energetically and emotionally. You feel tremendous release. And there are all sorts of other somatic practices like EMDR and movement. And, there's different things along those lines. Then there's the embodiment piece. Then there's the nature piece, right? Which is forest bathing, which I'm sure you're familiar with. But that's really about when you spend time in nature. That's why we love spending time in her. It is unbelievably healing. And it's actually been shown that there's this beautiful place called an institute called the Heart Math Institute that measures the electromagnetic frequencies of people and things. And in nature, it's at a high constant frequency. So, and it never matches us. Humans, we match each other. But when we're in nature, we match nature.
Wow.
So it will raise your energetic frequency and your feeling of peace when you spend time in Mother Nature. The spiritual piece, whether it's mindfulness or connecting to the other side or learning to see the signs. I have found really since my mother died, but definitely since Sammy died, there are so many messages coming through all the time, so many signs, so many communications I've had. And it's not like I'm special. It's just that I'm open to it. But when I teach people how to do this, they can do it too. Those are just 3 of the pillars. I can go through more, but there's 6 that I take people through.
Tell us the other 3.
Community is a huge piece because we need a tribe, and we need to be with other people who understand our pain, because for most grievers, like I said, they have to go back to their regular lives, and people don't ask them about their loved ones because they don't want to make them remember as if we're forgetting, or they don't want to make them uncomfortable, but not realizing that we want to be asked about it.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of be okay for the rest of the world. And when you're with other people who intimately understand your pain, that was really beautiful to me when I learned that, just supporting others, that just putting them in a group together, that in and of itself is healing.
Yeah.
To be with others who intimately understand your pain and who words aren't necessary to explain it.
When you can just sit quietly on the sofa.
Yes. And I try to teach people, because we don't know how to support grievers, and we say all the wrong things, or we don't know, we say nothing because we're afraid of saying the wrong thing. When you're absolutely right, you don't have to say anything. The people that were the most, you really learn a lot about your community when you go through terrible loss, because some people who I would have thought were my closest friends could not show up for me. And some who were like on the periphery of my social circle became my greatest support. Just because of how they could hold it.
Yeah, when my mom passed away, there were 2 other girls in Hong Kong who, one was sort of a new friend and the other one I'd kind of known peripherally. Their names are Nikki and Charlotte. And their mothers had also passed away from cancer in the same hospital on the same floor within the last 5 years of my mother passing away. And the 2 of them really showed up for me. And that summer, it was the summer that after I graduated Georgetown, before I moved to New York, we did everything together.
Yes.
And they were my community.
Yes, that is so beautiful and so necessary. I mean, I started this online platform. It first started in person here in LA, but then I started this online platform, the Grief Healing Collective, in large part, not only to teach people how to move through this process and give them resources, but also to give them community. So they connect with each other, or someone will just come on and be like, it's the anniversary of my mother's passing, and I'm having a really hard time today. And everybody, comes, just having that understanding is so powerful, and so beautiful, because it can be really isolating. You're already in so much pain. And then if you're isolated on top of it, it makes it that much harder.
Yeah. And what about the last 2 pillars, creative expression and cognitive rehabilitation?
Yeah. Well, the cognitive piece is really that's the piece that most people think of and do when it comes to grief. And it's not like it's not valuable. How do you deal with guilt? Getting over your woulda, coulda, shouldas, cognitively processing your regrets and understanding the stages of grief, which, by the way, are not stages. They are backtracking, spiraling all over the place. Yep. They're not linear, but understanding what to expect, that's usually the maximum grief guidance and education anyone gets, if they get it, which to me is 1/6 of the healing. But that's that's an important piece. And the creative piece is so beautiful, both in terms of processing and healing from the loss, but also in getting relief from the loss. Because when you do something creative, and most of the creative things I take people through has a processing element to it. So, you know, you'll do some writing where you're writing to your loved ones things you wished you said to them, or we just did a Grieving Mama meetup where we made soul collage, which are these cards where you just kind of make this intuitive collage from images that resonate with you. And then the card gives you a message, like you ask it questions, and then all of this stuff starts coming out of you. It's really beautiful. But when we get into creative flow, this has been shown in neuroscience, we kind of get out of our thinking mind and we get into that flow state where we leave our problems behind. That's why so many of us have artistic hobbies or are artists ourselves, because when you're in that state of creative flow, you're not thinking about all your pain or all your worries or all your fears. You know, you're just in relief. And the other creative piece is when you add grief processing to it, like writing a letter to your loved one. It's a creative way to process some of your pain.
When I think about how I healed or processed my pain, how my dad did, my father was so healthy. I remember so we spent that summer packing up my mother's things, right, donating a lot of things, planning her funeral. And then basically within 2 months, I was on a plane to New York City. My dad came with me to, I'd got an apartment there on 26th Street and Lexington Avenue. And I was also about to start my job. And I remember on the plane, at some point I sort of leaned over to across the aisle to see what my dad was doing. And he had a piece of paper. And it was a blank piece of paper, and he wrote out 2 lists. And one list said, things to keep doing after Phyllis's death. And the other list was things to do differently.
Wow.
I mean, my father's a very unusual Chinese man.
That is just a very unusual person, much less a man.
He's very self-aware. He does a lot of reflection. He grew up in Hong Kong. He studied in the UK. I mean, he went to Imperial College and did engineering there. Which, if you think about it, like Chinese culture and like the British sort of stiff
and engineering.
Culture. Yeah, and engineering. Like that does not make for a particularly self-aware or spiritual or like kind of sensitive man. But my father had that other side to him.
Yeah.
And I think my dad didn't even really see that I saw him writing this list. But it was very emotional for me.
Yeah.
He processed it very healthily.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
He would speak to anybody and everybody about it. And in some ways, I learned that from him, which helped me too. And he then said, one of the things on his list was, I'm going to thank everybody who showed kindness.
Yeah.
And my mom had a hot water bottle, because in Chinese culture, we only drink hot water, right? Because it's TCM perspectives. We don't drink cold. And especially when you're sick. And since my mother had cancer, she was only eating cooked and hot soups, foods, and water. And she also had started Qigong, which is a sort of Chinese form of sport, but it's a very
beautiful
controlled,
practice.
Right? You build your energy through it, and it's also good when you're sick or even when you're grieving.
Yes.
And somebody in her Qigong class had gifted her this flask. So my dad said, I'm gonna go find out who gifted her this flask, because that's very kind. Because that person saw that my mother just had a plastic water bottle, and this person had gone to her and said, you should drink hot water. So I'm going to gift you this hot water flask you should use. My dad went to the Qigong class, found the instructor, said, who gifted this? And that woman became my father's next wife.
Wow. What a story. Yeah. Feels divinely guided to me.
For my father, I think like for the person who's left, sometimes people think, oh, I can't date again. Yeah. Or I would never consider it. It's not fair to that person. But actually, I think if you want to be connected to the person who's left, it's actually when you let in the light, when you're closer to the divine, then it's easier for you to feel connected to the person who's gone. And I think that was the case for my father.
Yeah, I love that.
In contrast, I have an aunt who's a lovely lady. She was married to an uncle of mine, and he passed away from cancer. And she didn't even throw out his toothbrush.
Yeah.
I mean, it was years on.
Yeah.
And she all his suits, we were telling her, donate them, you know, and she said, no, like, I love him too much. But like, I mean, is that the way that you want to love? Is that a way of being fair to yourself and to that other person? Finally, you know, many years later, she started dating again, and we're all so happy for her that she's able to move on.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful and so true that, you know, I feel like, and this is that cognitive piece too. I find that so many people feel that it is a betrayal to their loved one who has passed if they allow in happiness. If, again, I mean, I talk to so many grieving mamas, thousands of them. And so I hear that, you know, they will leave their children's rooms like, you know, exactly intact. And I remember when the fires came through LA, I was getting so many panicked emails from these mothers who had left their children's room intact for years and now were having to evacuate and like pack up their children's things all of a sudden, and all of the trauma that was coming with that. But so for a lot of people, there is that piece of it, packing up their things is like a level of acceptance they're not really ready to step into yet, and or they feel like it's a betrayal. Even though where the person is now, they don't need their clothes. They don't care about their clothes. They're pure love. Yeah. They've left all their worldly concerns behind. You know, they don't care I remember I had this moment. My dad was the opposite. My dad, as much as he was wonderful in a million ways, and I love him and loved him, he was a bit of a toxic narcissist. And within 3 months of my mother dying, he was out there dating, looking for the, you know, he couldn't be alone. And I was furious about it. And feeling like he was betraying my mother, and he betrayed her a lot in life. And I was like, here he goes betraying her again. And that night I had a lucid dream, and lucid dreams are, I don't know if you've ever had them.
Downloads?
They are dreams where you're dreaming, but you also realize you're dreaming. So you're like awake in your dream, where you're dreaming, you're in your dream, but you're like, holy crap, this is a dream, and I know I'm sleeping, but and it feels hyper real. It feels unbelievably real. And so I had a lucid dream that night where my mom came to me, and she showed me herself, not as she was in her late 60s when she died, but how she was in my younger life, just beautiful and luminescent. And she was communicating to me. It wasn't through words, but the message I got is what I just said to you, like, I don't care. He can love whoever, like, this is his life journey. I love him. I love you. I am just love. I left all of those jealousies, all of those fears, all of my ego, all of my wounds, like that all stayed when I left. All I am is my pure essence filled with love. So she was like, you don't have to be angry for me. You don't have to be, you know, have some sense of justice on my behalf. I don't care. I just want everybody to find their peace and happiness however they're going to find it. And that message came through so clearly to me that it completely changed the way I operated with him afterwards.
And did your father must have noticed the change too?
So I don't know that he noticed or cared, but it mattered to me.
Because you can't change the people around you.
No.
You can only really change your reaction. And sometimes it is as simple as flipping a switch or seeing something differently.
Yes.
It's actually, it is that easy.
Yeah, it is. It can be. Absolutely. I always say those things, you know, on the surface, they seem so small, but it's like a huge leap underneath, you know, that shift. That's what the Course in Miracles says, that a miracle is just a shift in perception.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
A miracle is just a shift in perception. So, earlier, you know, it's interesting that you know from Chinese medicine that grief is processed in the lungs. How did you know that? I mean, you're American. Have you been to China?
No.
I love that you're telling me this. How do you know about this?
I'm fascinated with Chinese medicine. I was taking my kids to acupuncturists and Chinese medicine practitioners when they were little.
Here in LA or back in Chicago?
No, back in Chicago.
Your son's like in the audience.
Yeah, he remembers.
The tea was a bit.
Yeah, the stuff I made him drink he didn't like. But I've always deeply believed in that and seen seen how it works.
Yeah.
And I remember even so much wisdom there. Like one of my favorite pieces of wisdom from Chinese medicine that I love is about menopause and how for our entire lives, the chi, the life force, is all flowing toward the womb. And the reason the menopausal transition can be so bumpy is because what's actually happening is that the chi is changing directions. So it's no longer flowing toward the womb. It's now flowing into the rest of the body and allowing you to access higher realms like the wise woman you now are becoming. But that like shifting of going in one direction and having to go, and back the other direction is very disruptive to the system. So, yeah, I mean, I've been exploring that probably for
20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Wow. In traditional Chinese medicine, we say that emotions are narrowed down to 5 basic feelings, and that each feeling is attached to an organ. So as we said, grief is connected to your lungs. Fear is connected to the kidney. Joy to the heart. Worry to the spleen. And anger is in the liver.
Yeah.
And that feeling these emotions is normal, but it's the excess of emotion that weakens this organ. So in Chinese medicine, we say that prolonged grief will actually, because it affects your lungs, will cause shortness of breath, tightness, fatigue, and emotional stagnation.
Yes. And we see that, right? We see people get stuck in complicated grief. And I feel like that is for 2 reasons. Usually one is because it all comes down to fear, right? This is what I try to help people understand, is that it is scary as hell. And the only reason I did it, I only did this for 2 reasons. One, because I had already had the experience of what happens when you don't allow yourself to feel it. For me, once again, I'm not meaning to say that anyone listening is going to get cancer if you don't process your grief. But for me, I was aware that this had already happened. And the second reason is because I had a profound metaphysical experience. About a week after Sammy died, I was sitting on the beach trying to breathe. That's like my healing spot. And I was just trying to breathe. I didn't even know how to breathe anymore. I was in so much pain. And I've always been someone who knows things, kind of sees things. Like I'll be working with a client and I'll all of a sudden see a moment when they were 5 years old that's underneath their wound or something like that. Like I think we all have those abilities, but we develop them earlier for different reasons. And I did in those ways, but I'd never been someone who heard anything. Some people have what's called clairaudience, where they hear, not because they're crazy, but they're hearing messages or whatever.
So you're clairvoyant.
I was clairvoyant, yeah, and claircognizant, but not knowing. Yes, but not clairaudient. But there I am sitting on the beach, and this very loud, very loving, booming voice, no one else is on the beach, says to me, "Do you want to live or die?" And in that instant, I understood the question, both that because of what I'd said already, it happened with my mother and the breast cancer, like, do you want to live through this or not? But also the biggest question that I think everyone who's gone through tremendous loss, and I talk about this all the time, has to answer or has to decide is to choose life. You have to choose, consciously choose, not because you're going to kill yourself. Like in my case, it wasn't that I was going to kill myself.
Not actively, right?
Right. But I could choose to stop living, which a lot of grievers do. And I could choose not to want to live, right? Which a lot of people do, and which we unconsciously do in many ways. And so I was very clear. I was like, no, I want to live. I said it out loud. And in that moment, I had what I now understand from all the experts I've talked to was essentially a near-death experience, even though I didn't die. But I literally, it's hard to put into words, but I had the physical, visceral experience of the immense joy and miracle it is to be alive, to have a life, to have a body. And I was shown in like almost like a life review. It was a split second, but I was shown every second, like that sperm and that egg got together and you survived and grew into this 9 months. And then you survived your birth. And then you just survived your crazy childhood and everything you've been through. And like, it is such an insane miracle. Like, I can't even describe the physical awareness of the miraculousness it was to have the gift of life that I was just flooded with through my body. And I was like, yes, I want to live. I get it. And then the voice said, well, if you want to live, you need to leave your family, go away by yourself for at least a week, or you're going to die. And the first thing I said was, F you. Like, I can't go more into my pain than I'm already in. What do you mean go more into all the way into my pain? That's the last thing I want to do. I can barely handle this, much less go home to my husband and be like, okay, I know our son just died, but I'm taking off. But I couldn't shake it, because when a disembodied voice tells you you're going to die if you don't leave. So I went home to my poor husband, and my youngest was still living at home. He was a sophomore in high school. And I said, I just said to him, I have to go away for a week by myself or I'm going to die. And my husband, God bless him, I don't know if he was in shock or what, but he was just like, okay, you do whatever you need to do. So this retreat center where I had done a lot of programs in the past, this beautiful retreat center in the Redwood Forest near Santa Cruz called 1440 Multiversity, had reached out to me when they heard what happened and said, we're closed for COVID, but if you want to come, we'll open a faculty house and you can stay here. And I didn't think I was going to take them up on the offer. But when this happened, I reached out to them. I reached out to my best friend, Tina, who can hold anything. She's one of those friends that could just hold whatever it was. And she drove me there. And I went there for a week, and I went all the way in. And all these miraculous, like, everyone just sort of miraculous. She was like my grief concierge. She handled the schedule, but all these healer friends of mine, of hers, started coming in, somatic experiencing therapists, breath work teachers, grief yoga, body work, forest bathing, like all these different things just started being offered, and people were coming either in person or via Zoom. And by the end of that week, I had this like makeshift retreat where I had gone all the way into my pain, and I discovered that you do reach a sandbar. That is why I think people don't do it, is because we're afraid if we let ourselves feel it, we will never come out of it. There will not be a bottom. There isn't a bottom, but there is sandbars. And when you reach that level and you have those big releases, you feel so much lighter. And I started having that experience with support of going all the way in. So by the end of that week, I was not healed, but I was completely transformed. And I said then, I was standing at the mother tree where I'd spent a lot of time crying.
Mother tree
of the Redwood Forest. I spent hours in her branches, up and climbing the tree and just like lying on her wailing. And I said, I'm going to come back here. I don't even know that I could afford this if I were paying for this amazing experience. And I know most people who are grieving, you can't work, you can't function. They don't have the money to do this. So I'm going to raise the money to bring a group of grieving mamas back here and take them through this. And I did it for the first time last April. I raised enough money. I started a foundation, and we do all kinds of healing things for grievers, including mamas. But I brought 66 grieving mamas, and almost all of them were on partial or full scholarship. And all of the healers, all of us volunteer our time, and I basically created the same experience for them. And we're doing it again soon, this month, with another 70 mamas.
Wow, what a beautiful purpose, and to be able to share what you went through with so many other women.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a beautiful community, and it blew me. It was so profound last year that 1440 came to me and said, "We're going to help you with the scholarships this year."
Wow.
And so their foundation has been helping us, because they were so amazed at just the physical transformation they saw happening to these mamas after 5 days. I mean, I had one woman come up to me and tell me at the end, it's going to make me cry because it does every time I say this. She said, I was going to kill myself after this. My plan was to come to this, and then I have a plan to kill myself. And now I see a path. And I see a way to live and to find joy again. And so I'm not going to. And that was the beginning.
Losing a parent, let's both have a little wipe down here. Losing a parent is really hard. I think losing a child's harder.
Yeah.
Because losing a parent, that's the natural progression
Yeah.
of things, right? Like your parent goes before you.
Yeah.
But when I saw my grandma, right, and that's
Yes.
like my mother's mother, right, when we were all at her bedside as my mother was transitioning, I thought, gosh, to lose your child before you.
Yeah, it's
is
impossible.
The most painful thing.
Yeah, it is. I can tell you. It is. It is the deepest, widest pain you can imagine. And I remember saying that when my mother was dying, I was in so much pain. But I would say, like, I know this is just the way nature is supposed to take its course, if nature takes its proper course.
Yes.
And it's so unbelievably painful. But when your child dies, oh my God, it's impossible. I mean, people say to me, I don't know how I would live through it. I didn't know either. Like, how can you possibly imagine that? It's
and then you just do. Right.
You just do. It's a choice. And not only can you do it, you can grow through it. You can become a more tapped in, tuned in, more self-actualized version. And the more pain I've allowed myself to feel, the more joy I can feel. It's like stretched my capacity for all feelings.
You know what? It did the same for me and actually stretched my capacity for compassion.
Yes.
Like, because I lost my mom relatively early, right?
Yeah, you were.
And then later on, as my friends began to lose theirs, I just knew I'd just like sit with them.
Yes.
Right. And
you knew what to do.
Yeah. To be compassionate.
You become a gift for others. And there's so many. I mean, I always say this. There are infinite gifts that have come to me since Sammy's passing. I would give every single one of them back easily, without question, to have him back. But it can be, you can grow through it. You can learn to be a beautiful surfer. So you just kind of surf the waves when they come. And
sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low.
Yeah.
But
it makes you a deeper, I had this Aunt Esther when I was a little girl, my grandmother's sister. And it was like the family lore. Her son, Nicholas, had died in a scuba accident before I was born. But everyone would talk about her in hushed tones, like, oh, poor Aunt Esther, her one child died. And I was always aware of it. And they would always say, you never get over something like that. And I remember as a little girl who was very empathetic, I would find that so petrifying, more petrifying than anything else. This idea of carrying an anvil around your neck of pain that you have to live with for the rest of your life. And I couldn't imagine that. And what I've discovered, I think not just because I've gone through this tremendous loss, but because of the healing, all of what I've learned to process it and to heal it and to work with it, it is not at all an anvil. It's something truly beautiful. And it's something, yes, you learn to live with, but you live with it with so much grace and so much aliveness and so much wider capacity. And so much more tapped in and tuned in to so many beautiful things that it's not at all an anvil around your neck.
It's important to remember what you said, that you have to live through this.
Yes,
right?
You do.
And in Chinese culture, actually the biggest sin you can do in Chinese culture or in feng shui is to commit suicide, to take your own life, because life is a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you actively take your own, like that is the darkest thing you could do to yourself and your family.
Mm-hmm.
On your next retreat, you should bring an acupuncturist up there, because there are actually acupuncture points.
I know.
For grief. One is it's lung 7 or lung 3. It's a bicep. It's like right here, and then there's another point which is below. It's on the wrist, below the thumb, and another point which is on the wrist below the pinky.
Yeah.
And those are well-known acupressure points. So it's
I would love to.
It's lung 3, lung 7, heart 7.
We bring a fascial release person, body workers, somatic experiencing therapists, an amazing medium.
Wow. What about foods? Do you prepare special?
1440 is all farm to table, organic, plant-based diet. They make gorgeous, beautiful meals for us. It's really beautiful. But yeah, Chinese. I'll have to get some names from you of
Chinese
people you
foods.
like.
I'll send you some recipes.
Yeah.
When I lived in Beijing, when I moved to Beijing to open my etiquette schools, this is back when I was 26, 27, I remember, and this is, I mean, it's not that serious of a loss. I'd broken up with somebody, so I was grieving.
That's a kind of grief.
Yeah, it is a grief, and I was hurting, and I had an Auntie Vicky, in Beijing, and the first thing she said, I called her, and she said, "Come over to my house. I'm gonna make you soup." And in Chinese culture, we see food as medicine. And there are foods that nourish your lungs,
yes,
and your qi.
Yes.
And I remember she would make me, it was a boiled poached pear drink that was hot. And she would say, like, this is to moisten your lungs.
Aww.
Which is also to help with grief.
Yeah.
So I want to move on to, we touched a little bit upon this just now, and I want to do a deep dive into it, which is spiritual connections and life after death.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that you believe it's possible to stay connected to loved ones who've passed, and you said that you received gifts or you received signs.
Yeah.
What was a sign or a moment that felt like a message from someone? It was, you mentioned your mother.
Yeah.
What about one from Sammy?
Well, first of all, I get tons of I have lots of friends who have I already did before he died, which I think is one of the reasons it was as grace-filled for me as it was when he passed, because I already had been living in a very spiritually connected place. And a lot of my, my closest friend, one of my closest friends is a woman named Anita Morjani, who's a best-selling author. She died, and it's all been documented. Like, she was gone, had terminal cancer, tumors all down her back and her body, all of her organs shut down. She went to the other side. She had a whole experience there that she writes about in her book, Dying to Be Me. And then she came back. She was given the choice to come back or not, which many people report. And she came back because she had a purpose here from this, and that her husband's purpose was tied to her purpose. So she came back for that. She opens her eyes. She's supposed to be gone now. She opens her eyes and she's like, I'm going to be fine. And within 2 weeks, she left the hospital with no cancer cells in her body.
Wow.
And that was 17 years ago. So this is like the people I hang out with, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm already
So you're open.
I'm very
receiving.
open, and I had a lot of medium friends, right? And so they were just giving me so many messages. And I had one friend where I was like, so first of all, he would flash the lights all the time. I would change the light bulbs, and I'd be like, Sammy, I'm trying to go to sleep. Stop flashing the lights. And the light would stop flashing. Even the other night, and by the way, my husband does not believe in any of this stuff, okay?
To this day? Still?
To this day. No, but I don't even try to convince him. But we had this hilarious moment the other night where we recently moved into a house that has like 10-foot ceilings with can lights, in the ceiling.
Yeah.
And there's maybe 8 of them. I don't know. And I had turned on the lights before he came in the room. And one light just right over my head started flashing. I was like, okay, Sammy, I know you're here. I love you. We don't need the lights flashing. Please stop.
Message received.
Yeah. And then Sam, my husband, gets into bed. He's looking at his phone. I go and turn off the overhead lights. But that light would not turn off. It was just lit. And the lights were off. Mm-hmm. And he's like, that light's not turning off. So I look at him. I look up. I was like, okay, I get it. Now turn off the light, please. And the light just goes whoop and turns off. And he says, are you talking to the light? And I said, yes, as a matter of fact, I am talking to the light.
It's your son.
Yeah, I didn't even bother saying that but it's those things happen all the time. Or I was sitting with my friend, this amazing medium, Susan Gra, and I had been saying to her earlier, I've been so busy that I haven't really taken the time because you have to kind of get quiet to connect with them. And I've just been going. I haven't really connected to Sammy. And so like 20 minutes later, we were sitting there and this is a recent friend, like since Sammy died. So she's not someone who's known him since he was little or knows a lot of stories about him or anything. And my son's sitting here, so he'll know what I'm talking about. I don't think I told him the story. She just starts going, Sammy, Sammy, bo bammy, mo me, my, mo mammy, banana, fana, fo fammy, Sammy, which is what I would sing to him all the time. Oh, wow. And it would drive him crazy. But eventually, when he was little, he loved it. But then he'd be like, and I always called him Sammy Bo Bammy. And I was like, why are you singing that? And she's like, he's telling me to sing it to you.
Wow.
You know, it just happens constantly.
Wow.
When my mother died, I said, okay, I'm going to choose a messenger for you, Mom. I'm in Chicago, living in Chicago. It's March, freezing. You are a hummingbird. I'm going to choose something really hard. You're a hummingbird. Okay.
Oh, so this is you actively engaging
yes.
in the process.
Yes, you
Wow.
absolutely can. So I'm like, you're a hummingbird. And, you know, if I see a hummingbird in Chicago in March, I'm going to know it's you. I go downstairs. My kids are watching the Nature Channel, you know, and there's a documentary on hummingbirds on the TV. And every single day for a year, I saw a hummingbird, not in human, you know, in 3D, but like on a painting, on a coffee cup, on a record cover, on a card. Like every single day, I would see a hummingbird.
Well, in Chinese culture, we say after somebody has transitioned, after they've died, the 7th day they come back to visit their loved ones. And in fact, it's called qi tou, which means like the first 7th, basically. And it's out of a 49-day mourning period. And my Uncle Richard, who's my father's older brother, he said that on that 7th day, he saw a butterfly. A butterfly flew into his apartment. And at first he didn't think, he was like, well, but it's the 7th day. He's like, oh, that must be Phyllis. And then actually on that same night, my dad saw something. I was passed out. Like in fact, we were getting ready because everybody's like, oh, it's the 7th day, 7th night. You're going to see something. I went to bed at 8:30 p.m. because I was like, I do not want to see anything. I'm scared. Like, I'm going to bed. And my father stayed up. With our pet cat, because our pet cat Patty Paws, who I'd had since I was 9 years old, he actually put Patty Paws like in her little crate because spirits are yin energy, and animals are kind of more yang energy. So he didn't want the cat to like disrupt mom
the message.
And he got a very specific download.
Yeah. I mean, I really believe in most of the mediums I know who are legitimate. I mean, they blow my mind and I've watched them read hundreds of people at this point because they come to my retreats with me and everything else, and they blow people away. I mean, there are a lot of charlatans out there, but these are real, they are legit. But they have all said to me that they are constantly sending us signs.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just a matter of noticing them, like the butterfly, right? They may not have even sent the butterfly, but if they see you saying, oh, hi, Mom, they're like, oh, okay, I'll do more butterflies. Or if they send you a butterfly and you don't notice it or say, I'm just making that up, they're like, all right, well, she doesn't believe the butterfly. I got to find something else, you know? So if you acknowledge it and you say, thank you for the sign, then they give you more of that.
Just now you mentioned that there were some times when you would get busy and so you wouldn't quieten yourself where you could be in touch. Well, in Chinese culture, we actually set aside specific days of when you should honor the dead, because we believe that by honoring the dead, they support the living.
Yeah.
And so we have Qingmingjie, which is Tomb Sweeping Festival, and we have the Hungry Ghost Festival. And on these days, the whole family comes together, even in Hong Kong. I think it was like mid-April or something for tomb sweeping. And it would be like a horde of like 20 to 30 relatives, and you basically go cemetery hopping, like grave hopping, and everybody,
to all your ancestors.
Yeah, and you'd have the flowers, you'd have their favorite food. Like my mom had a favorite like pineapple bun or something that she liked, so my grandma would always buy that. And it's like it just helps with the grieving process, but also that it's like we are setting aside this day, and this is what we're gonna do.
Yeah, to honor them. Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And there's so much healing that can happen with that. But I do find that in our busy, distracted lives, you know, your body is your transceiver. It's how you transmit and how you receive. So when we're in our heads all the time and really, really busy, this is one of the reasons the embodiment pillar is so important. The more in your body you can be, the more grounded in your body you are energetically and, you know, even intellectually, and the more quiet your mind is, that's when you can really commune. And I love teaching people how to do that, the different ways you can do that.
You know, I do feel that sometimes, like in our busy lives, and also I do think because, at least where I grew up in Hong Kong, it's not that we don't have that much of that grounding, or that much of the spirituality. I think what our Chinese, like having these festivals, what it does for us is it gives us like a process, like a formal process in which to grieve.
Yeah.
Because again, with our bottled up emotions, it's not something that
you have to
comes
have
us.
it. You have to have a plan.
Yeah. Yes, it helps us cope with loss a bit better.
Whatever works. Listen.
Yeah. I want to move over to how we support others through grief. Why do people often freeze or say the wrong thing when someone dies?
Because they're so uncomfortable with it. They're afraid of making things worse, and or their own grief is coming up that they don't want to face. Like I had a dear friend who completely abandoned me. I saw nothing, heard nothing from her after Sammy died. And about a year later, she resurfaced and she apologized and said, listen, I'm so sorry. My father died of addiction. Sammy wasn't an addict. He was experimenting and took something laced with fentanyl. But she said, my father died of an overdose. And I haven't properly processed that grief. And when that happened to Sammy, it just brought all of it up. And I couldn't be around you. I couldn't face it. And I'm so sorry, and I can have grace for that. You've shown me who you are. So now I believe you, and you're not in my inner circle anymore, nor do I know I can count on you, but I totally can have grace for that. So sometimes people, because we're not taught and we don't have a model for it, people say dumb things, or they just say, and like, it's been 3 months. Like, aren't you over it yet? Or at least they're in a better place. Or, there's these things they say that you're just like, oh no.
And you're right. It is really more of a reflection on them.
Yes.
I remember I was at a friend's house when catching up with her, and we were very close friends. And I got a phone call from my dad. Patty Paws, my cat. So
I want to meet Patty Paws. Is she still around?
So Patty Paws was I kind of just took her off the street actually when I was 9 years old. When my grandmother, my on my dad's side, who she was in hospital because of old age, and I was very young, and I was 9, so I was going to the playground a lot, the park of the hospital, and
Patty Paws came up.
There was a litter of kittens.
Aww.
And so we just took one and took it home. And Patty Paws I had in my life from 9 years old until 24 years old.
Wow.
So 24 was when I just got admitted to Harvard Business School. I was hanging out at a girlfriend's house when I got the phone call from my dad saying Patty Paws had died. And Patty Paws had been sick for about, a couple weeks. And obviously, I was very sad.
Yeah.
And my friend looked at me and you could tell she was so uncomfortable. And she said, well, it's just a cat.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I hear that from pet lovers all the time.
But to me, like, I didn't judge her for it because I knew how emotionally damaged she herself was.
Yes.
Because her own parents had divorced at a very young age. She has sort of a very strong tiger mother, and she's not in process with her own feelings.
No.
So I didn't judge her. I just felt pity for her.
Yeah.
She couldn't even hold that.
Right. And because of what you'd been through, you could. And so I do find that the people who are the best, you don't have to, like I had this one friend who already was a dear friend. She lives in New York City, but Sammy had died during the pandemic. So she was working from home, and she had already said, even before he died, I'm going to come visit because I can work remotely from anywhere. And about, I don't know, 5 days after he died or something, I called her or texted her and I said, when are you coming? And she said, I just landed. And she moved to LA for 6 months to be near me. Wow. And I couldn't even talk. I wouldn't let anyone near me. I was like a wounded animal for like the first month. People were trying to talk to me, trying to come over. I was like, stay away. I just wanted to curl up into a ball, which is very different than my usual personality. And she would just come and leave a coffee on my front step or just text me and say, I'm coming over to bring you a coffee. If you want to come out and give me a hug, you can. If not, I love you. I'm here when you want me. And that was such a beautiful gift, right? Just being willing and she said to me so many times since then, it taught me so much walking by your side through that it's not about me.
Yeah.
And it isn't about your love for me. It's about you and your pain. And so it taught me not to take any of it personally. any of the ways that I felt rejected or like you didn't want to see me or you didn't want to talk to me had nothing to do with me. And all I needed to do was just keep showing up in the gentlest way possible.
And you know what? She showed up for you, but without overstepping
Yes.
or overwhelming you.
Yes.
And I think that's a fine line, right? And that's something, that's the best thing someone can do, to say, hey, I'm here for you. I understand if you're not ready or if you're not comfortable, but like, I'll be here if you need me.
And don't say, the one other thing people always say is, let me know if there's anything I can do.
Yeah, that's so
no.
cliche. It's just,
and I get the intention, like you're saying, but I don't know what the hell you can do, right? So say to me, I'm going to Target, and if there's anything you need, from laundry detergent to milk, I will leave it on your doorstep. Just send me a list, or just let me know if you want me to grocery shop for you. You don't even have to send me a list. I know what you like. Like, offering to do, I'm going to come and walk your dog for you. Offering to do those things makes such a difference.
When my mom was diagnosed my senior spring at Georgetown, I was really moved by how many people, and again, maybe peripheral friends or just other students that, like classmates that I didn't really know that well, but how many of them reached out to me.
Yeah.
And because at that point, they all knew my mother had terminal liver cancer and I was going to take like 2 weeks off. And I would get texts from people where people say, you know what, my father died in a car crash when I was 6 years old. Let me take you out to lunch.
They know. Just like you ended up doing for others after you went through it. Yeah. I think that's what I mean. The people you least thought of or expected become your most beautiful support system. And the other thing is to remember, like after the first month, I don't know how it is in Chinese culture, but after the first month, everything dies off.
Yeah.
Right. And so some of the most meaningful condolences I received were after that. Like someone sent me an orchid plant a month and a half after Sammy died with a note that said, I'm guessing all the flowers have died by now, but I want you to know that I'm still thinking about you. Or I had another friend that just sent me a green heart every single day for a year, just a green heart in my text, just letting me know that she was thinking about me.
I think for our listeners out there, I mean, we all know people who are grieving.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those are very like practical and kind tips that our listeners can immediately use for those who they care about. I want to play a mini game. Okay. I want us to break down why some well-meaning phrases can miss the mark.
Okay.
And so it's sort of what to say versus not what to say. So I'm going to read some common phrases people say when someone dies. And Dr. Laura, I would like you to respond helpful or hurtful.
Okay.
And then offer a better version.
Okay.
Okay, first one. Everything happens for a reason.
Stupid. Hurtful.
Right. Why? But so many people say that.
Yeah.
Like, why is that?
Well, I mean, look, I honestly think everything does happen for a reason.
I agree as well.
But you don't want to say that to someone who is actively in the pain of loss, because you're not honoring their pain. You're basically asking them, and you yourself are, but you're asking them to bypass their pain. Basically to say you're not, because everything happens for a reason, I'm basically saying to you, you shouldn't be upset.
Yeah, it's invalidating.
It's right. And it may be true, and maybe you can have that conversation with them down the line, but when they are bereft, you do not want to say that.
Is there a better version?
No. I mean, I think you have to say, I think the things to say is like, tell me about them.
Yeah.
What did you really love about them? Speak their name, ask questions about them. You know, like that's so much more beautiful than...
And healing.
Yeah.
Okay, second one. At least they're in a better place.
No, not helpful. Because it doesn't matter. They may be they are in a better place. But that doesn't, once again, invalidating your pain, right? These are all things we say because we're so uncomfortable with your pain that we think we can convince you out of your pain or somehow soothe you out of your pain by these little niceties that just serve to make us feel unheard, disrespected, and invalidated.
You're so strong. Helpful or hurtful?
I think that it depends. I think that can help. I've heard that every day, since Sammy died. And I don't mind when people say that to me. I always say, well, I don't have a choice. What I don't like is when they add on, you're so strong. If this happened to me, I don't know how I would survive. That is what I'm ready to sock you in the face for. Like, all I say is, I would have said the same thing before this. You don't know how you're going to survive until you do. But they're kind of saying like, wow, that sucks for you. I get, it's not at all helpful. But saying, honoring that you're strong without implying
you're
or that you're so strong, so don't show me any of your pain, right? Like, to me, I think in my case, because I was showing my pain, but also still going on with my life, you can tell me I am strong. Yeah, I'm really freaking strong. That is true. And thank you for noticing, right? But if I'm squelching my pain and acting like, everything's fine, and you're telling me I'm so strong, you're actually giving me the message that it's not okay not to be strong, which we have to have permission to be.
What about don't cry? They wouldn't want you to be sad.
I hate that one. That's very hurtful. No, tears are alchemy.
Yes.
And they are love, and they are healing, and they must be shed. It's so important.
Even
to
in
honor.
traditional Chinese medicine, we say when you let your tears flow, it heals your liver. Like
It
if you
does.
bottle it up, then that's
Yes.
bad for your liver.
It is. It's not good for your body. It's not good for your soul. It's not good for your emotional life. I remember seeing this study where they looked at tears under a microscope, and tears of laughter look different than tears of grief, which look different than tears of anger. It's just, to me, tears are so beautiful and something that we should openly welcome.
Well, I'm glad we got to shed some tears.
Yeah, see, I shed them wherever I go. I'm glad you shed them too.
It's interesting because grief doesn't follow a timeline. And I think for our listeners out there, it's important to remember that healing isn't about forgetting.
Mm-hmm.
It's about remembering in love.
Yeah.
And Dr. Laura, could you share your most important advice for anyone grieving right now?
You got to feel it to heal it. Like, let yourself go through the portal. You have to be courageous to do it. But I can promise you that if you allow yourself to go into the feelings, to surrender to that which is happening, and with support, I'm not at all suggesting you do this alone, it will completely not only allow your burden to lighten so much, but completely transform you for the better. It's like a phoenix rising from the ashes. You can, it changes you, it transforms you, but in really beautiful ways.
Yeah, and I think that there's beauty in naming your pain. And what's interesting for me now is for people who I meet, so more recently, and they don't know that my mother passed away, they would never have guessed that my mother passed away because I talk about my mother in the present tense. Mm-hmm. Like if one of my friends is complaining about, oh gosh, I went home for Thanksgiving and my mom barged into my room at 7 a.m., my automatic response is, oh, my mother does that too.
Yeah.
And I do believe that they're still with us.
Yes.
And I often think I'm actually grateful that I had my mother in my life for the first 21 years, which were the most formative years of my life. Mm-hmm. And I honor her by remembering her.
Yeah, that is honoring her and honoring the love between the two of you. I think about that a lot. I think I just wrote a blog about that, actually, that if God, I imagine sometimes that God said to me before I came here, listen, I can give you this kid who is going to be so beautiful and brilliant and funny and kind and kooky and a handful and a half and light your life up and your family up and be such a gift, but you can only have him for 16 years. And then the losing of him is going to undo you and turn you into a mush, but then you're going to alchemize that and metamorphosize that, and you're going to come out of that stronger and clearer and better and able to help so many people. Do you want it? I would have said, absolutely, I want it. I would have taken him for whatever time I got.
Dr. Laura, thank you for coming onto the pod and for showing us that when we talk about grief, we don't deepen it, we dignify it.
Yeah. Thank you.
We talked a lot about grief today. I do want to mention your book, Sex Magic. And in fact, on the topic of sex magic, I have something to gift you, which is my vaginal care brand.
You have a vaginal care brand?
Anti-Vorta. Open it up.
Wow. Wow.
So, Antivorta, it means goddess of the future in Roman mythology.
I didn't know this about you.
Well,
that
yeah,
you
I
have
know, an etiquette expert having a vagina care brand. Got to, break some barriers.
Yes.
And so, yeah, this is, we have the spray and the hydrating cleansing gel.
I got to see what the ingredients are because I'm all about the vaginal lubricants. So that's amazing.
You can open it up. We're a very, very clean brand. In fact, do you use Yuka, the Yuka app, if you like ingredients? Yeah. If you scan our barcodes, we're 93%.
Oh, that's amazing.
Excellently. And by the way, 60% on Yuka is considered good.
Yeah, 93 is amazing. So, and they're made with Chinese herbs.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Formulated with traditional Chinese medicine.
That's amazing.
Our formula is called 五味消毒饮, and it's been used in China for 2,000 years, originally as a skin medicine for wound healing.
Wow.
So it's really good for sensitive skin. And you mentioned menopause.
Yeah, I was going to say it's really good for menopause.
Vaginal odor and vaginal dryness are real issues down there.
Japanese honeysuckle, organic.
Have a little spray.
Edelweiss. Wow. I'm excited. I had a lubricant for a while. This is the cleansing, the intimate spray. But I had a lubricant for a while, which wasn't at all sophisticated as this. But the reason it's important, it smells lovely. The reason it's important is because your vagina is a mucous membrane. So everything you put there gets absorbed into your bloodstream. And so people are putting all kinds of
I heard CBD suppositories, which just shocked me.
Yeah.
That's something.
Yeah, that is something. I loved always, but this I'm excited to try. It's probably even better, but I would just put Damiana and organic coconut oil, fractionated organic coconut oil, and some other things together and made this beautiful lubricant I would just give to my friends. Oh, this is good.
That's a wash. So use it. Oh,
this is a wash. Oh, I thought this was a lube.
But that's okay. I mean, we don't have lubes yet.
We got to make lubes.
Yeah, well, we're focusing more on the hygiene. so we have our wash wipes and our sprays.
What about sex? Well, this is pre-sex.
Yeah. And so just, give us some sentences on sex magic.
Yeah, well, so Sex Magic is really
out now, right?
It's out now, and I have a whole beautiful gift package I'm giving people when they buy the book now. They get my quantum sex course for free. It's like $137, 8 modules. You get it for free. A Sex Magic ritual journal. They get to come to a live Sex Magic event with me. They get to enter into a raffle to have a one-on-one session with me. If you just go to drlauraberman.com, Sex Magic is where you find out all about it. But it's so cool because this is my 10th book, and I thought I had said everything I could possibly say about sex. But this is really about, and I think you would find it really interesting because it's about the energetics of sex to me. And I wrote it as the antidote to bedroom boredom because people are looking for that spice and threesomes and opening our relationship and porn. They're looking in all the wrong places externally. And there is a wealth of ancient wisdom from Tantra, Taoism, Kundalini, Kama Sutra, thousands of years old that I have put into a more modern system. Half of this is like tangible exercises you can do to move the arousal up through your body, to circle it between the two of you. What I found that people are looking for when they say, how do you spice it up or how do you keep the excitement, is we're looking for intense excitement like we had in the beginning of the relationship. But what Sex Magic gives you is intense excitement, whether you're single or in a relationship. But if in a relationship, intense excitement with someone with whom you are being vulnerable and deeply authentic with. And it makes sex profoundly arousing physically and emotionally and energetically, and also profoundly spiritual as well.
Which tantric sex is very spiritual. Yes.
And it also teaches you, orgasm and high sexual arousal is the highest frequency your body can hold energetically. And so for those who practice manifestation or the law of attraction.
I do.
So ancient, thousands of years old, sex magic itself is the art of manifestation where you set an intention, and there's a process I explain in the book, but you set an intention, and when you hold that intention through arousal and orgasm, you're matching the intention with this very high frequency state, which kind of supercharges what you're manifesting into the quantum field.
Wow. And so for our listeners out there, I know this episode was on grief, but Dr. Laura Berman was actually one of the early people to talk about quantum love.
Yes.
And manifestation and all this on Oprah. So definitely check out the book. Check out any of the grief retreats that Dr. Laura is holding. Thank you for tuning into Mind Your Manners. This is your host and etiquette life guide, Sara Jane Ho. And remember, no matter what life throws at you, with me in your ear, you got this. Visit my YouTube channel to watch the full episode, or actually don't, because we're both very blotchy, or at least I've been very blotchy.
I'm sure I am too.
On this episode. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and I'll see you next Tuesday.